Hey, um, howdy everybody, and howdy Tony. I'm Stephen Robbins, and I am here today with Tony Ubertaccio, who is a friend of mine. We were catching up a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that he has a new business, and it is selling as a service. And I was like, "Oh, that sounds very interesting. I've never heard of that before, and I've been around for quite a long time." So, welcome, Tony.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
So let's start with can you describe briefly the arc that you have been through, because this is something that's fairly new to you, but yet it also looks like it may be one of the more long-term successful and sustainable things you've done.
Yeah, so I think that's a great catch on your part, Stephen. So
Whoops.
my background has been varying forms of sales, pretty much through college and post college, and that was the last decade or so. And so I've either been selling in retail environments or selling technology, selling enterprise technology, and or consulting on sales, marketing, sales strategy. And so in the last 2 years, I have been in a role that is, I think, very fitting and very exciting for me, which is as a, for lack of a better term, agent in technology sales. And so we can get into what being an agent for technology businesses is and looks like. But for a buzzwordy, catchphrasy title for today's episode, we came up with selling as a service, which is in effect what agents do for technology businesses.
Cool. And I'm sitting here remembering we met in an elevator on the way to Frances Hesselbein's
We
100th birthday
did.
party, I think.
Well, she wouldn't agree with it.
90,
90s, but
90. Okay.
yeah, that's exactly correct.
It's okay. Her 93rd birthday
Sure.
party. um, uh, yes. Uh, I guess for some reason I didn't realize that so much of what you had done had been sales and selling. I don't know why. I thought first
Always.
you were more of a like content person or something. Oh, okay,
So
cool.
it's been a hybrid of marketing content, but marketing with the intention of selling, right? So there are some people who just like to write things because words are important. Whenever I've written, it's been with the intention of selling, and that led me into SaaS sales in the late teens, and I've been pretty much around that industry for the last 6 or so years.
Got it. Okay, so then selling as a service, you described agency. Right now, when you said that you can kind of call it an agent, I remember when we first had this conversation, I was sitting here picturing, as I mentioned to you before we went live, you're kind of rocking the Fabio look, and I was imagining you at these high class Hollywood parties introducing Tom Cruise to some producer who was going to put together a whole ensemble with Tom Cruise and uh, um, why am I spacing Johnny Depp and
Right.
like all of the
So
people who are
movie
currently in the
agent.
news for whatever. Exactly.
Exactly.
That's not what you mean.
So no, in this sense, agent means more agency, independent actor, not a part of the other person's business. They are an agent. I've used in my business name. It's called One Source Technology Brokers. I like the term broker now more than when I'm communicating what I do, because there are actual parallels to other spaces that make sense to most people. So if you're buying insurance, you might use an insurance broker. If you're buying mortgage, you might buy a mortgage broker. And in that same vein, if you're thinking about industries and careers, um, being an agent and a technology broker has a lot of the same parallels and a lot of the same benefits as being an insurance broker, where you're thinking about relationships. You're thinking about closing a sale that will typically pay you for years to come. Uh, and so there's a lot of excitement, or maybe not excitement, but a lot of uh, reasons why young people try and get into insurance brokerage. And it's, there's always a carrot at the end of the stick, which is years from now, you're going to be grinding now, but years from now, you have five big customers and they they'll pay your grandkids college tuitions. And so while it isn't necessarily that lucrative for me today, that is the same promise in perhaps in technology brokering.
Well, for whatever it's worth, a friend of mine from MIT uh, became an insurance broker himself after many years of doing high tech stuff and this and that. He was like, I discovered that I could sell a policy and then make money on it for the next 20 years. He's like, so I just started doing that, and that's the least MIT like job in existence. And I'm pretty much set for life. So,
Exactly.
as a
And so
profession itself,
it's
go ahead.
interesting, the idea of doing work once and getting paid, in perpetuity. In a insurance brokerage, it can sometimes be, an annuity payment that pays for what is, for all intents and purposes, ever. In technology brokerage, when we help a customer find a technology that works for them, um, I like to say it's a win-win-win, right? So typically for that customer, they'll either get the product, the technology, the service at below what would be a traditional MSRP for that technology. Uh, so they'll be happy. They'll get white glove, higher touch, better experience through the sales process. The technology provider will have sold a technology without necessarily having to pay their own internal sales team and their health insurance and their benefits and their commissions. They'll just have recognized a sale. Perhaps they've done some things by way of sales engineering and marketing, and so there are costs certainly for the technology provider, but less than if they were selling it with a in-house sales team. And then the technology broker gets paid oftentimes a commission that is split both upfront and for the lifetime of that contract. And technology contracts are often multiple years, up to 5 years, with
Okay.
with
So
renewals.
let me lay this out to make sure I understand. So
Mhm.
as a broker, like if I think about a real estate broker, I, as someone who wants to buy real estate, I go to the real estate broker and say, I want a beautiful 3-bedroom house that overlooks a lake. And the real estate broker knows about a dozen different houses that are beautiful 3-bedroom houses that overlook lakes. They learn more about exactly what I want, like, oh, maybe I have trouble walking upstairs, so I want it to be flat rather than multi-storied,
Yeah.
whatever. They then evaluate the 100 houses that they know about, and they say, here's the 4 that we think are good for you. And they actually shepherd me through the sale, and they handhold me every step of the way. So from my point of view as the customer, what I'm getting is an expertise person who knows what the options are in the market and can help me make a decision and can help me get to the point where I have the house. Once I have the house, and then the seller has made money because they sold me the house. The broker has made money because they get a commission on the sale, and I am happy because I have gotten the house that I want at a price I'll say that I'm willing to pay, given today's real estate market. I don't know if you would say a
Sure.
low price or
No,
not.
below market.
So for your company, I would come to you and say, I want, and I'd like to get a little more understanding of the
Sure.
scope. Would I come to you and say, I want a new webcam? Would I come to you and say, I want a call center? Would I come to you and say, I want an entire accounts receivable system that's integrated with my human resources systems, blah, blah, blah. Like at what level do
So
I come to you for the house?
so those are that's a great series of questions, and I will do my best to take it and run with it. So uh, the short answer is well, first I'll say I think that's a pretty good description of the relationship we have. The way I like to break down our role is we help with introductions, negotiations, implementations, supplier relations, and then escalations. And so, in your metaphor, you're pretty much dead on. There are some differences when buying technology than a home. I like to use mortgage broker than perhaps real estate broker, but it's about the same. Where we fit, and it changes based on who the agent is and what their specific skill sets are. Where we fit is ideally with customers that have, uh, I'll say, 50 to 100 employees and can go up to hundreds and then thousands of employees. And so If you are an individual person, a solopreneur, you probably don't need to buy technology through a broker. Where we have a sweet spot in the industry at large is traditionally with companies that might have some in-house technology lead, but perhaps not enough people to fully run an integration or implementation or fully vet all of the softwares available in a space. Another way to think about it is if there is a very complex or let's say cutting edge new technology that the team doesn't have core competency in, that's where agents and brokers tend to have a lot of value. And so while this is different than perhaps your initial question, I'll lay out this space a little bit more and say that technology providers at large have a strategic decision to make when they go to market, and that is, how do we want to sell what it is that we provide? And so some customers or some products, some software, some technologies are able to build a brand name and do content marketing that creates inbound demand, and people arrive on their website and say, yes, I'll subscribe for a free 10-day trial, and then, oh, you know what, take my $14.95. It's a great product.
So I'm thinking like Zoom would fit that description.
Early days of Zoom is a perfect example, and they are actually a great case study in this space at large. But where people are coming because the brand makes sense, it gets PR, it gets some sort of stickiness and traction and virality, and now all of a sudden everyone's using its brand name to define the space. Those people typically are using inbound sales. People are converting on site, purchasing the technology. In those spaces, you don't necessarily need a broker to tell you use Zoom, and there's no value created by a broker pointing you to Zoom. Sometimes a slightly different relationship would be like affiliate. You'd be an affiliate of a product. You say, use this link, like Amazon, right? Use this link, I get 2%. A Zoom competitor that is going up market, that wants to get enterprise customers.
Enterprise, for people who don't know the term, enterprise would be like very, very large customers, like multi-site. How would
multi-site, thousands of employees, annual revenues in tens or hundreds of millions versus tens or hundreds of thousands, or even single-digit millions. And so if you're going to try and break in at that level, it's typically a lot harder to get the sale. And so how do you get that sale? Do you hire salespeople who are going to then, take lead lists and nurture them and create relationships and then over time eventually try to sell them? You can, and a lot of people do that. They build internal sales teams. Or you look around and say, who out there has relationships with CTOs? Who out there has relationships with CEOs? Who out there has relationships with decision makers? How can we build relationships with those people? And we'll empower them to either do all of the selling or a portion of the selling, so that we can sell faster and more successfully into more complex organizations. And that is the reason that a agent model exists. And it's not new, right? So it's been considered, it's called the channel, right? So it's channel sales. You're selling through a channel, a sales channel, where there are independent agents and brokerages that are supporting today primarily software and SaaS-based sales.
So you're a channel.
We're a part of the channel. Yes.
You're part of the channel, and you keep the relationship. So you're the one. If I'm starting a company and I'm like, oh, I need someone who has relationships, I come to Tony and I go, hey, Tony, you have relationships, and you do, presumably, because it sounds like you work with a set of companies and CTOs. So you're the person that I want to go talk to. Now, if I'm coming to you, let's say I have a Zoom competitor and I'm calling it Zip. Get the little thing there, the Zoom. I just got a second one of you appearing. I'm not sure if that was.
Second. I'm still here though. Can you see me?
We can see you twice. This is kind of cool. Like we're living in the future. So apparently we're not using Zoom or Zip.
No. There we go.
So when you have a situation, then so I'm Zip.
Right.
Do you now exclusively recommend me? So, well, sorry, actually, let's go in the other direction. Yeah, no, let's go that direction. So I hire you, and you would only then recommend me to your CTOs, or would you sometimes say to a CTO buy Zoom? Sometimes you would say buy Zip. Sometimes you would say buy, buy. I don't actually know the space, but buy some other conferencing software, buy Skype. Like, how do you view? Where is your allegiance to the different players in this whole molecule or ecosystem?
I think it's a great question. When thinking about the space at large, I'll say one extra thing is that you have the technology providers, and then you have agents, and typically, and this is just for the education of our listeners, in most instances, there's going to be a middleman, an additional middleman in this stack of relationships, and they are called master agents. And what they do is, for lack of a better term or lack of more clarity, they work on all the back end operations, legal relationships, contracts with technology providers, and the agents have the relationships. The agents do the educating, sales, groundwork, right? And so there's a back end component as well. So if I'm a technology provider and I'm looking to use a channel, it's not that they're looking for Tony, they're looking for master agents. Tony has relationships with master agents typically. That's going to be how it works most times. With that, I have the ability to sell, at this point, hundreds of different technologies through my master agent relationships. I am, at this point, truly technology agnostic. So Zoom, Zap, Zip, Zeus, whatever all of them. So I like to say from AWS to Zoom, A to Z, we have either the technology by name, brand name that you're thinking of, or their number one, competitor who is channel focused. And the way that I operate, and this isn't maybe the case with every technology provider, is I communicate as transparently and directly as possible. And so if Zoom is not a technology that I can sell and get a commission on it, but Zoom is the right technology for you, I point you to Zoom. And so Zoom is an interesting technology because they are now leaning into channel sales and channel growth. And it's perhaps because they've done all the selling they could do direct to consumer, and now to do the next more complex, full office integrations and get rid of phones, let's go entirely Zoom. There needs to be relationships. And while they have an internal sales team, the channel typically has these relationships built out over years and years and years of work. And so, in short, what would I do? I would say here are at least 3 technologies that seem like they would do exactly what you need. Here are the pros, cons, benefits, and here's what's in it for me on all of these. And so the way that I work is I make it very clear that up front, we're going to just try and assess what's going on in your world, what your needs are, and then I'm going to go to my toolbox, workshop, relationships, Rolodex, and come to you with a handful of options. And then we're going to look at what those options mean for you, and you can make an informed decision.
All right. I'm sitting here wishing I'm looking around my control panel. I was hoping that I had a whiteboard because I actually want to draw a little bit of this as a diagram.
Sure.
So what we basically have then we have 4 players. We have the technology provider.
Yep.
And those technology providers, the relationships are with master agents.
Yes.
And then the master agents have relationships with you, and you have relationships with all of the buyers, with the CTO. So there's actually 4 people in the channel. The reason this makes sense, and I'm stating this as a fact, but please correct me if I'm wrong. The reason look at that. Okay.
SaaS, master agent, agents, buyer. 4 legs
got
in
it.
the
Cool. And
image. Yes.
and the reason it makes sense is because the technology providers don't want to have to deal with tens of thousands of agents and hundreds of thousands of businesses, so they can form a few relationships with the master agents, and they'll know that they're going to get good distribution through that channel.
Correct.
The reason that the master agent wants to deal with agents is because, number one, the agents are kind of a sales force for the master agent, but the master agent, they're too busy maintaining all these relationships with with enterprise customer, not with enterprise, with the technology providers. So most of their actual efforts are understanding the technologies, monitoring the spaces to bring new technologies on as they can, etc.
Back office operations, and
Yeah,
the best of them also now are hiring very, very strong sales engineers
got it.
that
Okay,
have technology expertise, industry expertise.
so that's why it makes sense for them to be separate, because they can be separate and totally focused on the technology element of it and leave the heavy lifting part of the selling to the agents. The agents then get to spend all of their relationship building on the end customers and the end buyers, and that's why that makes sense. And then there can be a relatively small number of agent master agent relationships,
Exactly.
which
And then
okay,
to flip that value proposition, think about it as a customer. So as a technology, you're like, oh, this is cool. I get to just deal with a couple, points of master agent relationships, and all the sales happens. As a customer, you say, well, I could go direct to them. Like I could just use the website and transact sometimes, or I can work with their sales team, and that's great. But if you are spending $2,000 a year with a company that's doing 10 million in revenue, that's not that big of a deal to that technology company. But if you purchase through the channel and your agent slash master agents have $300,000 of their $3 million of business in a hypothetical, and the agent gets upset and the master agent gets upset on your behalf, all of a sudden you're swinging a much bigger stick when you have a product request. You're swinging a much bigger stick when you have a issue that is reoccurring that needs to be escalated. And so for me, for a lot of technology, and not all technology, it makes sense to have advocates on your side that aren't just like customer support at the vendor that you're using.
so basically, if I'm using Zoom and I have a support problem, I call Zoom and I wait on their support line until
And
it's
not to
gone
hang anyone else to
somewhere in
dry,
a
but
call
I
center.
believe you've talked about a technology problem with Ring Central, or support issue with Ring Central. So
Maybe.
as someone who has sold a number of phone systems, soft phones, hard phones, uh, and the whole works, our channel sales into technologies that look like or rhyme with Ring Central is really a value add, specifically in that type of technology.
Okay, so basically then, even though I might get put on hold forever if I call the support line, because you represent so many clients that in aggregate you're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars of business, if you call the support line, you're going to get a response. You're going to get a response.
Yeah,
Or you're not even going to call the support line. You're going to call their VP of customer service and say, do you want
exactly
to
right.
maintain these?
Who bangs out an email 2 minutes after receiving our email, and then you get a phone call, right? So like
Right.
that to me, and again, it's based on the technology. You don't need us typically to buy 4 licenses to, Google Workspace. But if you're going to think about consolidating technology, upgrading technology, if you want to assess for multiple retail locations what the best way to have all of your locations talk together and be redundant and be secure, those things, all of a sudden it makes sense to have professional outside assessments, and then have the vendors jump through hoops to win your business versus subscribe or request a sales demo and then get called 100 times over the next 6 months by an SDR that works for the technology company, which is its
Okay,
own
so
pain.
so far you've convinced me that I want to buy through you. You've convinced me that if I have a technology, I probably want to sell maybe through you, maybe through your master agent, right? So we've now covered these two ends. Why would I want to be you? Because I'm assuming that people watching this, if they've watched this far, they fall into one of three categories. Either they're a software supplier and they're like, oh, interesting, this might be a good channel for me. Or they're a buyer and they're thinking, oh, wow, look, I could actually get better customer service and possibly better rates, depending upon what the business is, and somebody who understands my business more by coming to an agent. But I'm suspecting there's a third kind of person who's thinking, this sounds like an interesting job. I have relationships with a bunch of people. Why and how would someone become an agent?
So why, I think, is, we pointed to it early in the conversation, which is there's at least for me, there's something very powerful about the model, right? And so the model is a work once, get paid for a while business. And so if you have relationships, if you enjoy selling, if you enjoy, and maybe selling isn't even the right word because some people are, sales phobic, but if you enjoy being of service, being useful, being helpful, being an expert, and you have some relationships, it seems like an obvious next fit. And so what makes it exciting if you're money motivated is almost all technology, as far as I can tell, has perhaps a 2 or 3x like margins, like the core cost to deliver. You could say it's, the marginal cost is zero for some technology providers, but let's just say that if they sell something for $100, it costs them between $25 and $33 to deliver that. And so there's a lot of margin to give away. And so typically you're seeing commissions on most technologies that start around 20%. And so those commissions are paid every time the vendor gets paid for the lifetime of the contract term. And then on top of that, most technologies, especially the highly competitive technologies from technology providers who are, I'll say sophisticated or see long-term value way higher than upfront costs, are paying things that are called SPIFs, and that's a sales incentive. It's an acronym for something that means you get paid upfront on the lifetime of a contract. And so that is sometimes a 1x SPIF would mean whatever a normal payment is, we're going to pay you that upfront at signing. Sometimes it's 7x SPIF. That's whatever a normal payment is, 7 times that upfront. And it can get crazy into 10 or 12x SPIF, depending on the technology and depending on the provider. And so there is money motivation as well in this industry.
So I have 2 quick questions, and they're going to have to be pretty quick because we're almost out of time. So question number 1 is, and this is, I know the answer to this because we talked about it before, so you're going to have to like super condense it. Does this mean that you personally, Tony, have to be familiar with thousands and thousands of technology platforms and help a customer integrate them all?
No, it means that I need to have people who trust me when I make introductions for them to people who are experts in the specific technologies they need.
Okay, so that's good. So someone who wants to get into this job doesn't need to already have this pre-existing like massive knowledge. Does the master agent provide some of these experts for you? Like how do you get the connections to the experts?
So it's going to be a combination of the technologies that I help select for them with the master agents, as well as master agents having sales engineers or technology experts who, depending on the context and the situation, will either say they work with me and they are my in-house technology expert, or I say, this is Steve, he works at Acme, and Acme is my partner, and he's going to help us vet the technologies that are available.
So if somebody wants to get into this business as an agent, and to be perfectly candid with people watching, when Tony told me about this, I was like, this is a good business. I'd like to kind of get into this myself. How long does it take to build enough of a book of business that you could make it a viable career? Is this something where you're going to spend the next 5 years getting to the point where you can pay your mortgage, or is this something where you can be up and running in fairly short order?
It depends on who you are. I mean, I think that's always the answer with sales. It depends on who you are. It depends on who you know, and it depends on what type of activities you're doing regularly. For example, I'll just say, like, if you there are people in this agent world that have like 5 clients. Those clients are, you know, Goliaths in technology, and they purchased internet through this guy who made a relationship. And it's not like you're selling unknown internet providers. You could sell AT&T, right? So I'm selling AT&T, and I'm selling certain add-ons that make all of the locations smart and secure. And you make those introductions, and Goliath business spends $100,000 a month on 200 locations internet, and you make 20% of that for 5 years, or for however long that relationship is with AT&T, and you make a upfront spiff of 5x because AT&T wants to win the fiber war. The numbers get big if you sell to big clients, right? So if I'm selling single seats of Zoom, you're going to work for a long time. If you help one organization switch from landlines to Zoom phones, and that organization's big enough, you're going to see some good-sized checks coming monthly.
Okay. Well, you've certainly given me a lot to think about. I don't know about anybody who's watching. But so for all the people who are watching, if you are a business that is looking for enterprise level or slightly smaller than enterprise level, because you could do this for companies of a few hundred people or whatever,
exactly.
Technology solutions with potentially integration services provided and the ability to be a very heavy hitter when it comes to getting support from the company, and you would like a technology solutions provider, talk to Tony. If you are a technology company and you would like to open up new channels and use this agency model as a way to get your programmer or to get your programs or your software, your hardware, or whatever your services are out there, talk to Tony. And if you would like to become an agent yourself and are interested in being part of the middleman and forming relationships and helping people solve problems using the agency or using the technology provider and master agent relationships that you have, talk to Tony. So there's a lot of reasons to talk to Tony. If you're interested in looking like Fabio, talk to Tony. So Tony, anything to add to my ringing endorsement?
No, that was very generous. Thank you. I'll just circle back and say that our policy, like I have on the website, like, we are not consultants. You are not paying me a consultant fee. There's no fixed rates. There's no gotchas in my model. If you have any questions at all, I'd be glad to chat with you or answer them and point you in a good direction.
Right. See, the cool thing about that, right, is like if I think, oh, I would like to maybe do some agenting myself, I'm like, it sounds like it can actually be done ethically. You only have to make introductions. You're not on the line for being either an integration expert or a technology expert. You have other people in the network who are knowledgeable in the parts of the technologies that you're not knowledgeable in.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like kind of a perfect business. We'll talk.
Talk. I'm enthused by your enthusiasm, and I think that you are seeing it the way that I see it as well. It is a very exciting space to be a part of, and you can be honest. You know, selling a single. So I sold a single technology and I'm sorry, I know that we're over. Into enterprises that was a nice to have. At times, the core functionality was perhaps a need to have for certain people in certain instances. It was really a nice to have, but to sell that, you need to be committed to the truth that this is necessary and this is high value. And sometimes it's hard to sell a single thing and hold on to your ethical hat. And that gives me a lot of life, because today I can say, here's the landscape of the space. Here's what I see. Here's why you might like vanilla. Here's why chocolate might be good. And here's why Rocky Road, this newcomer, could also be great. Here's what's in it for you. Here's what's in it for me. And I'll let you make the decision. Like it ends up being your choice. That's powerful.
You don't have to force the buyer into a particular model, because you get paid for solving their problem, because it doesn't matter which vendor you recommend. You've got relationships with this whole panoply. And by the way, the flavor that you conspicuously miss, especially for those who've been following for a while, is Oreo ice cream cake, specifically from JP Licks in Boston, which is the best Oreo ice cream cake in all of existence. So thank you for joining me, Tony. It has been a real pleasure. Oh yeah. I had it for my birthday this year, and I had a bunch of friends over. It was the first in-person party we've had since COVID started, and people were like, they were eating this ice cream cake, and it was great to watch them, because they would take a piece just thinking it was like normal old ice cream cake, and they'd take a bite, and suddenly they get this look on their face like a deer in the headlights, and they get this big smile, and they'd be like, what is this? And I'd be like, this is Oreo ice cream cake the way God intended it to be. And they'd be like, this is the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. I'm like, I know. There's a reason I talked about it for 10 years on my podcast.
I cannot wait to come back up to Boston. So thank you for the time today, Steven.
Sure.